Black Lives Matter COINTEL. The main issue with Black Lives Matter COINTELPRO is that they were not planning a movement prior to Ferguson. I guess in the manner that they claim they were. They were disingenuous with that from the get-go, which kind of I would just say kind of perverted their entire thought process and strategy going forward, which really kind of, to me, ultimately like killed the movement, for police corruption and really like, against racism and, white supremacy, which kind of came from Ferguson's movement. But anyways, back to the COINTELPRO, I guess how they came about. Um, they were never a grassroots movement, period. They had, according to some sources, over a couple of $1 million prior to Ferguson. We know it's definitely upwards of, 100,000. That's just a lowball estimate. That's the lowest that I've seen directly. I've also seen things that have it much higher. I'm not going to get into the details. My perspective is different just because I was who they were competing against. It's not an issue of, I guess, who's funding who or whatever. I just know actions. Um, with them not planning on, I guess, starting a movement prior to Ferguson, they didn't think about certain strategies that they would need to have a successful movement. And really, they were a nonprofit that was used, kind of for a hidden agenda to co-opt, the youth movement, which was not even, just black at that point. Regardless of, who started the movement or the, I guess, the breakdown of the races, that's irrelevant, especially as far as, what we're about. When we saw things going on in Ferguson and the Mike Brown situation, it was an issue of doing what we claim to be about. And personally, I'm a victim, of police corruption. I guess, you can say that just because in certain situations there's not anything that you can do. You kind of have to go through the legal process and sort things out. So as far as that goes, it's very personal. It's an issue that I definitely want to see solved, and there's a lot of other issues related to it that I feel like could really help out the country in a lot of different ways, and a lot of communities that are at risk and that stood up against police corruption. It's like they also they weren't just biased and just saying that it's just a police issue, but a lot of the things that they wanted to do in their communities they weren't supported and they were kind of to me, shut down. And I know personally how media works. I know, everything about, agendas and stuff like that. It's always about your intent. And I also know, personally, I guess what people in certain communities were saying, that's part of my job too, whether it's, I guess as far as how close that access is, like that's something that you're supposed to always be aware of. So there's just so many different issues and dynamics at play with the Black Lives Matter COINTELPRO that you kind of have to look at each individual issue and see like how it caused issues as far as quote unquote progress on the particular issue, um, and then kind of go from there. And you also have to take into account it's been over almost 3 years. In 4 days, it'll be almost 3 years that it's been going on. I would say probably a good 2 years or a year and a half of direct manipulation after they tried to infiltrate and kind of co-opt, and we were kind of running them out. Um, but yeah, I mean, Black Lives Matter, COINTELPRO. The main issue is that they were disingenuous about what they wanted to start and who they were. And it's a very big task, and we were dealing with a very serious issue, and there's victims, there's families involved. Some things you just don't do, and they did things purely for profit, and ultimately like it hurt the movement. and it's kind of it's not irony, I guess it's certain just laws and just how people react and why we have like why people say certain things, it's from experience, but ultimately like the, I won't even say greed because they weren't even supposed to be there, but um, yeah, ultimately like the lust for money and the lack of compassion or support for the people that they were, claiming to represent, led to the downfall of, I guess the broader movement and their movement, initially.